Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Legal Access. We get together each week to give you access to different aspects of the law. Today we're going to be talking about automobile accidents, something that unfortunately many of us are well too acquainted with. So if you've had an accident recently or you want to know what your responsibilities are in case you do get into an accident, whether it's your fault or not, today's the day to call up and get those questions answered. Phone number is on your screen. It's 843-848-8080. Give us a call. We'll get you on the air here and get your questions answered. Our panel here today to answer those questions for you from the McGuire Law Firm is Ian McGuire.
Good to see you.
Also
Dave.
from the McGuire Law Firm is Tiffany Buffkin. And to your left is Robert Sansbury.
Nice to be here.
It's great to have Robert back with us. Robert's an outstanding attorney, and of course today's topic is car accidents and collisions, and he does a great job with those. But tell us a little about your practice, Robert. I know you're also a mediator. Do a great job with that as well. But I know you do some other things, so
Sure. Well,
tell us a little about it.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for having me on the show. Dave, it's great to see you again, and Tiffany. So my name is Robert Sansbury. I have my own practice here in Myrtle Beach. I was born and raised here. I practice primarily in the area of auto accidents and personal injury, just like the two attorneys to my right. But I also do some civil court mediation and some LLR licensing defense as well.
Which, yeah, talk about a little about that, because it's sort of it's definitely a niche, and it's really important for people that are in that situation to have an attorney.
Well, my wife's in the medical profession, and my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, and I sort of kind of fell into this through that. But it's basically the idea of when medical professionals have licensing issues, they get into some trouble sometimes. Sometimes it's misunderstanding, but they need defense as well. And so that's before the medical board or the veterinary board, things like that. So I really enjoy it. It's a nice little change of pace.
Yep.
Automobile accidents, that's our topic here today. And we like to start with some of the basic questions that a lot of people might have. I know a lot of people were taught by their parents when they were being taught how to drive. It's like, well, if you get into a minor accident, just exchange information. Maybe just give your card numbers or your insurance numbers to the person you got in an accident with if there's nothing major that's gone on. Do you how do you advise people on that topic?
Yeah, I usually tell everyone to definitely call and get the police out to write an accident report. Especially depending on what state you're in. So in North Carolina, it's kind of hard if you don't have an accident report. In South Carolina, you can still kind of go through the process without an accident report, but it's definitely, for insurance purposes, the getting your car fixed and your medical bills paid if you require treatment is a much more straightforward process whenever the cops come out and write an accident report documenting what has occurred.
So don't worry about looking like a jerk. Go ahead and call the cops. I mean, don't worry about that. The other person might get mad at you for calling the cops, but you're just protecting yourself.
Yeah.
I think you're really just documenting what happened.
Yeah.
You're just making sure that there's a record of it. So.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I mean, when a police officer comes onto the scene after you've had an accident and fills out a report, does that report get put into evidence during any kind of a case or a trial?
Not usually.
Yeah.
There's exceptions when there's a death or a great bodily injury where the MAKE team comes out and they do reports, and they can get their testimony will come in. But most of the time in the average car wreck, the officer didn't witness the collision. He or she is coming out and really just filling out a report based on information that they're receiving from the drivers. Maybe there's an independent witness, but to answer your question, that generally is not going to be admitted at trial. And we've had cases, I'm sure Robert has had cases, where people have come in, and I'll preface what I'm about to say with the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of cases, what the officer finds on their report is correct.
Right.
But every once in a while, they'll find somebody at fault that wasn't at fault, and vice versa. And so we always will look at it. And insurance companies will do the same thing. But because they're getting a very quick picture snap of what happened in the middle of a hectic situation. Really, a lot of times now, especially, there's videos that can be obtained, and or there could be independent witnesses, and a lot of times, not a lot, every once in a while it comes a contradiction from what the original report says.
So it's not necessarily a deal breaker if the police officer says, Dave, you were at 55% at fault during this accident. I mean, that doesn't necessarily torpedo my case.
Not at all. Nope.
Our phone number is on the screen if you have any questions about automobile accidents here today. It's 848-8080. Give us a call. We'll get you on the air. Let's go to Gallivan's Ferry right now. Rich is on the line with us. Hi, Rich. Thanks for calling in. What's your question today?
Okay, in December of last year, I was pulling off a Route 501 onto 544, and I pulled up to a car that was stopped to make a left-hand turn. He had his blinker on, and he wasn't moving. There was no obstructions in the road or anything like that. I had dotted lines to my right, so I passed around to the right. Unbeknownst to me, he flags the person at the stop sign to cut in front of him.
Nah.
And the guy that was in the car, he had a bunch of young people in the car. He comes back. When the state trooper came, he says, "I'm a witness." And the trooper writes me up for illegal passing. The only problem is state law. Nobody can flag anybody through a stop sign but a police officer. Plus, his position on the road, he had the right of way to make the left-hand turn. My car ended up getting totaled out.
Okay.
And so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to interrupt
All right,
your
Rich.
stream of
I
thought.
think we got the gist of that.
Yeah, and
Appreciate
stay
it.
with us. But essentially, it sounds like somebody else is coming out, saying, and you, if you had been in the right-hand lane, you certainly would have had the right of ways from what I'm hearing. So I think you have you certainly have a defensible position. I don't know how you each.
I think
feel
I'm just
about
trying
it.
to picture the intersection. So are there, Rich, are there two lanes?
He's not there with us at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
Well, I guess if this is an intersection where there are two lanes, one that can go left, and that my understanding is he said he had a dotted yellow
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
So would he pass to the left or the
I
He
said
said
he
it
went
passed
to
to
the
the right.
Okay. And there was a lane over there to the
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
a wave out situation.
So they
Right.
wave somebody out. So I would imagine the person they're waving out would not normally have had the right of way.
Yeah.
So I certainly would sit down with an attorney and if it's not too late, especially if you have injuries, because it sounds to me like at least there'd be comparative fault if,
Yes.
That's
if
what I
not.
was thinking.
Do you want to talk about how comparative fault works?
Yeah, no,
Ian?
go ahead, please.
Well, and Rich, if you're still with us and you can hear us, the way comparative fault works in South Carolina is in some states you have to be totally 100% without any fault judged later on in the case in order to recover. For an example, North Carolina, they still have contributory negligence. Here in South Carolina, we don't have that, thankfully. We have what's called comparative fault, which means you can be up to 50% responsible for the accident or 50% at fault and still actually make a recovery in your case. So in your case, I think based on what we're all hearing, you've probably got a situation where based on the confusion, based on kind of the confusing circumstances of multiple cars and people waving and this and that, there's a strong likelihood that some fault might be placed on you. But based on what you're telling us, I think if I would speak to an attorney, there's a colorable argument that the other side is either partially or majority at fault in this case.
Yeah, and I've never really thought about this, but as far as the rules of the road are concerned, obviously there are rules that they tell you how to handle a four-way stop and who's got the right of way. But if somebody like to my right has the right of way, but I actually pull out in front of them because I thought I'm just going to go ahead and roll through the light or whatever the case may be, and they hit me just because whatever whoever had the right of way doesn't necessarily exonerate them from being at fault in a collision like that, because a lot of the times you'll get to a four-way stop and somebody will wave somebody else through because I think you got there before me, so I'll go ahead and let you through even though I've got the right of way. So.
Yeah. And it really is going to come down to like where everybody was located in the intersection, like
Right.
whether the person passing should have seen that, that this other person
Right.
was being waved, and whether they had the ability to slow down and avoid the collision. So
Right.
yeah, it definitely can be multiple parties.
Because it doesn't sound to me, and of course we're hearing one side of it, but
Right.
it certainly sounds reasonable, the actions that
Yeah.
the caller took. But I certainly would sit down with an attorney if I was in his position.
And one thing that I'll just mention with the property damage, because I know that the caller said that his car was totaled.
Right.
That's something that really should be handled like as soon as possible, because usually if you have a dispute as to whether you were at fault or not, those are arbitrated.
Right.
The property damage claims. So that's definitely something that I think he needs to sit down with an attorney, quickly, since that happened in December.
All things being equal, I mean, if an incident happened where you come up to a four-way stop and you want to make a left turn and there's somebody in front of you that's not moving and you just go around them and the other person hits you, regardless of whether or not somebody's been waived, you would probably be found at fault for going around the person who's in front of you, I would assume.
Yeah, I think that the law is pretty clear that the first to the intersection typically has a right of way,
Right.
Regardless of where you are in the four-way scenario. But in that situation, going around a vehicle who had not yet
Right.
moved, I mean, obviously absent some sort of extraordinary circumstance where the vehicle's broken down or
Right.
something like that would be a problem. But I would say to Rich and anyone else out there, there are specific laws dealing with things like that, like the right of way. And then there are overarching general legal principles, things like
Yeah.
the duty to keep a proper lookout, the duty to act with due care in every situation. So kind of what you were saying, Dave, just because you have the right of way doesn't mean you can act the fool.
Yeah.
You have to still just take reasonable action.
Absolutely. Tell you what, we're going to run to a break here real quick. Rich, hopefully that helps you out a little bit, and good luck in your situation. When we get back, we'd love to answer your questions as we're talking about automobile accidents here today. Give us a call. The number's on your screen, 848-8080. We'll be back in just a few seconds right here on Legal Access. Welcome back to Legal Access. We're talking about automobile accidents here today. If you have any questions about any car wrecks, and if you've been in one recently, or if you just want to know about them in general, today's the day to get those answers. On our panel here today to answer those questions for you is Ian McGuire, also Tiffany Bufkin, both from the McGuire Law Firm, and Robert Sansbury as well. Now, Ian, a while back you mentioned as far as having maybe dash cam video as far as accidents are concerned. How much are we seeing dash cam video and pictures from people who have been in accidents from their cell phones being put into evidence during cases like that? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's increased exponentially over the past few years.
Yeah, well, some people have the dash recorders, but there's also just a lot of businesses in town
Right.
are going to have video as well. So if an accident occurs on an intersection, the first thing everybody does is sort of, if there's a question of liability, is try to track down the various videos from the businesses in the area. So that is becoming more commonplace, right?
Yeah,
That's
for
right.
sure.
So jumping out of your car and starting to snap pictures is not being viewed as, oh my gosh, I got whiplash anymore.
No, I think we're at the point where people have expectations of everybody having a phone, and so videos and pictures are sort of essential and expected.
Yeah.
Tiffany, you mentioned as far as Rich is concerned, the value of his car because his car was totaled. What if somebody's having trouble getting, the value of their car back? Unfortunately, if you get in a wreck, you're going to get what the blue book is for what that car is right now. Even if the car is paid off, somebody wants to pay their car off, it's like, great, I don't have any car payments, but you get a new vehicle and now you've got payments all over again.
Yeah.
Can you recover any of that, or are you just out of luck?
Not usually. Sometimes I try to lump some of the losses from property damage into settlements for bodily injury, but it's really hard. It goes on the reimbursement for the vehicle is the fair market value of the car at the time. So I always encourage everybody, if you're buying a new car, please purchase gap insurance, because gap insurance really is not very expensive. It's usually, $1,000 to $2,000, but it's rolled into your loan payment, and then GAP protects you in a situation where if your car is only worth, the fair market value is 30 and you owe 40, then the GAP insurance will pick up to pay. But it really is kind of an unfortunate situation, so you really have to kind of gather all the evidence from all of the different market evaluations and just argue that the fair market value is higher than what the adjuster
Right.
is offering you.
Now, Robert, you get into an accident and an ambulance comes to take you to the hospital and you say, no, I'm not really hurt, I don't want to go. Is that going to hurt the plaintiff's case later down the road when they say, hey, you didn't go to the hospital at all?
Well, I mean, it depends, but I can sort of give you some general guidelines there. I would say that if you know you're hurt, you know you're in pain, and you have any hesitation, get in the ambulance, go to the hospital, get checked out, and I'll tell you why for a couple of reasons. One, there's always that small risk. There's always that small risk. It could be a fracture in your neck or something that you know, with your adrenaline going, you can't quite feel, and you want to play it safe. Better safe than sorry. Get checked out. And the other reason is you've clearly documented the injuries from the get-go. It's kind of one of those situations where the insurance company is going to attack you either way.
Yeah.
If you go to the hospital right away, they're going to say, oh, he jumped the gun, he's running the medical bills up, he went to the hospital. And then if you wait to go the next day, they're going to say, well, if you were really hurt, why didn't you go? The safest route is to go. If it is not truly an urgent, emergent situation, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with waiting till the dust settles, making sure your kids are good and everybody's good, and then going to the hospital later that day. I see no problem with that.
Now, Ian, you also brought up great bodily injury earlier. What if somebody, you get into an accident? I mean, we're talking about civil cases here, but what if you get into an accident that somebody is judged as being DUI, driving under the influence? How does that affect your case moving forward? And should you try the civil case before the criminal case goes to court?
Well, I mean, as far as that, usually what's going to happen is the individual is not going to want to testify in the civil case until he has some kind of disposition in his criminal case. But as far as the civil case is concerned, it's a whole different area of damages called punitive damages. And if you have punitive damages, it usually greatly will increase the value of the case from a practical standpoint, from settlements, but also from a jury. They're going to have to make an assessment on actual damages, and then if there are punitive damages, and punitive, of course, is for punishment, and it's societal as well as individual. We want to discourage people from doing bad things to keep us all safer. So that's what that's for.
And Tiffany, even if somebody is judged innocent of driving under the influence, but they did blow like a .07, so they had been drinking somewhat, is that going to be something compensable in a civil case against them?
Yes, you can still argue punitive damages for sure, because the burden of proof is different. And in criminal, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil cases, it's just a preponderance of the evidence standard. Certainly, you know, sometimes if the defendant goes to a jury trial and they're found not guilty, then that's something that, you know, has an effect on the civil case, but you still argue punitive damages for sure.
All right. Coming up in just a second, we've got our final segment, so we still have time to get you on the air if you have any questions about automobile accidents. Coming up in a minute, we'll talk about if you've had any accidents while you're at work, on the job, in a work truck or work vehicle, and also what kind of insurance you should have to protect yourself the most. That's all coming up here in just 1 minute. If you have any other questions, the number's on your screen. Give us a call here today on Legal Access. Welcome back. It is Legal Access. We're here Thursdays on WMBF News. If you're listening on the radio, obviously you can't call in right now because we do this on Thursdays on TV, but you can call us if you have any questions right now about automobile accidents. 848-8080 is the phone number. As I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about what's called a third-party case. If you're driving your work vehicle and you get into an accident, that is a unique way of, I mean, you'll have a unique case right there, because not only will you have a workers' compensation case if you get injured while you're on the job, but you'll also have a case against the other driver if it's their fault. Obviously, this has to be done in a certain order, in a certain way, so this is something that definitely needs the touch of an attorney.
Yeah, so if there is a situation where someone is in the course and scope of employment whenever they get into an accident, then it is important to consult an attorney because, like you said, the workers' comp case needs to be handled first. And you definitely don't want to settle the third-party claim before you resolve the workers' comp claim in full because you could waive your workers' comp claim if you do that. And then there's also subrogation issues with the workers' comp settlement. So it is an area that if you have a case where you have a workers' compensation claim and someone also caused the accident, then I always encourage people to consult with an attorney before doing anything.
And then you always have the questions about, well, I was on my way to work. I was in my own personal car, but I was on my way to work.
Yeah.
Does that count as a workers' comp claim?
Yeah, so it definitely depends. For the most of the time, no. If you're coming to work or you're going home from work, it's not going to be compensable. But there are exceptions that I think we're seeing increasingly more often, at least I am, where if you're getting paid mileage, if you're in a company vehicle, if you get paid for your time to travel, or if your employer, like if I asked one of my paralegals to go and do a favor for me and they're in an accident on the way to run that special errand, even though that's not, driving isn't a part of what their ordinary job duties are, that definitely would be a compensable case.
That's what you get for forcing your underlings to do your dirty work.
Lesson learned.
Go pick up my dry cleaning. Okay.
No, I don't do that. But if I asked, hey, would you go, pick up these medical bills in person or whatever the case may be, then for sure it'll be a compensable accident.
Let's talk about insurance. That's always something we get to whenever we talk about automobile accidents. Obviously, it costs a lot if you go to the doctor, if you go via ambulance or take yourself. In just an overnight stay, it's going to cost you at least $25,000, $30,000 just for an overnight stay. If the person that you got into an accident with only has the minimum amount of insurance, then you're going to be paying a lot out of your own pocket to cover that. How do you make sure that that doesn't happen?
Well, there's a lot of different, when you say insurance, we can talk about car insurance, we can talk about health insurance. There's definitely some different insurance that could apply. The first thing we would look at is what we call the liability policy. So if somebody calls an accident, they're at fault, absolutely, that's going to go towards, it's going to have two types of coverages, one for your property damage and one for your bodily injury, which would include your medical bills. There's another type of coverage we call MedPay or medical payments coverage. Some states call it PIP. Personal injury protection. That is, I would encourage people at home to check their own policies for that. It's an inexpensive and effective medical bills payment coverage. And then finally, there's obviously traditional health insurance as well. So it's not always out of your own pocket. There's definitely some things, some nuances there.
Well, how can you ensure yourself that you're not going to be out of your own pocket? What can you do? I mean, we talk about uninsured and underinsured policies.
Yeah, I think underinsured is extremely important, and also Robert mentioned PIP, personal injury protection. You can get as much of that as you can. You get an umbrella policy if you were to injure someone else severely and you have a lot of assets. I would strongly recommend having a umbrella policy in place. They're actually very reasonable as far as the price compared to how important it would be if you were in a situation where you needed it. So anything else that you could think of, but those are the things. But we talk about underinsurance all the time, and it bears repeating how important it is to have that, because if you're injured through no fault of your own, and the other person has no insurance or very little insurance, you want to have some protection, because as we all know, the cost of medical care now is extremely expensive.
Okay, weird anecdotal story. On my way here, there was a piece on Highway 501, something blew off a truck. It was like a big piece of fiberglass or insulation or something, and everybody in front of me was, dodging out of their lanes to try to avoid running over it, which they should have done. But one of those people caused an accident or got into an accident because of some debris in the road. Whose fault is that? Is that the person dodging the accident, the person who runs into them because they weren't paying attention, or the person who was driving the truck and the stuff blew off?
Yeah, who wants to?
So I think
the answer is yes.
Yeah, everyone is at fault. Truly, though, if you can get the identity of the truck who initially caused the debris, the problem is that most of the time you don't have their identity, right? So the question is, did everybody act reasonably? The person who was trying to avoid the debris, did they overreact? Were they texting and not paying attention, and should have had time to slow down instead of jerking in the other lane? That's going to come into play. If truly you don't know who caused the debris to be in the road and no one acted negligently, but there's, property damage to the vehicles, then that would probably be covered under comprehensive coverage under the insurance. But it definitely just comes down to what we were saying earlier, that there's laws and then overarching principles.
All right, so pay attention and watch the debris. Want to thanks for all the phone calls here today.
There's a
Next
lot
week
out
when we get
there.
together, we're going to be talking about family law. So if you have any questions about that, hold on to those next week. For Ian McGuire, Tiffany Buffkin, Robert Sansberry, I'm Dave Priest. See you again next Thursday here on Legal Access.
You may wish to consult a lawyer to obtain case-specific legal advice. Information regarding lawyers can be located online or by contacting the South Carolina Bar Lawyer Referral Service, toll-free at 1-800-868-2284. If you are currently represented by an attorney, you should direct all legal questions to your attorney. The nature of any legal issue may depend on a multitude of factors. Therefore, the information